So, looking at the map, can anyone identify the primary trade route?
So, it connects the Atlantic coast to the interior mountains.
Today, we are joined by Ankur Patel, a candidate for Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education. I am Manata Dave, and let's get straight into it.
I've been a sixth grade history teacher, and in sixth grade history, it's world history. And what we learn about India from an American textbook is, I call it Hindu-phobic. It's racist. It undermines kind of the Hindu and the Indian perspective, and very much is a colonizer's outsider perspective that simplifies it. As caste is the primary thing, cows are religious, and curry was a spice and trade, right? And then the Aryan invasion mythology, so many other things that are in there that are taught, and people believe because we are not able to properly represent what actually happened. Be the first Indian person elected to the Los Angeles School Board in over 100 years, 122 years. No Asian person is elected in the last 30 years to this school board. After college, I became a teacher. I taught in South Korea for a year, China for 6 months, gave me a global perspective. I came back to the States and got a master's degree, and I ran for office for Los Angeles City Controller. I didn't win, but the guy who won hired me. So then I worked for a school board member and saw how this big LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District, almost 500,000 students, $18 billion budget. It's a really big seat.
Do you think that policymakers today are quite disconnected from the ground realities?
The ground realities are very different in the classroom.
There is one criticism about the large public systems in education and especially policymaking, which I have often seen in India as well, that there is a lack of accountability at multiple levels. So how would you build a culture of accountability in LAUSD, and how do you ensure that those accountability without over bureaucratizing the system?
This is so simple. It's transparency. Know who's getting paid how much for how much work.
Classroom or boardroom, where do you feel more at home?
Classroom. I do like the classroom. It's nice to be with, but also when it doesn't matter what group of kids or adults, if they want to learn. But then again, we see so many instances at all levels, right? Like you're talking about India or Los Angeles, different municipal benefactors and contractors benefiting throughout election cycles and even generations. Time for change. We know what works. I've got the track record. It's time to put in Ankur Patel in office for school board.
Today, we are joined by Ankur Patel, a candidate for Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education, someone who has been a student in the system, worked within it as an educator, and now brings a clear grounded vision to improve it. With real on-ground experience and strong focus on accountability and student well-being, he represents a new kind of leadership in education. I am Manata Dave, and let's get straight into it. Hello, Mr. Ankur. Briefly share your journey from being a student in LAUSD to now running for its board. What was like a defining moment for you that made you decide to step into this public leadership? And was there any specific incident in your school or your career that pushed you toward this path?
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate you and Young Indian in politics. And as a student in the system, you often wonder if you can change it. I grew up through Los Angeles Unified School District at Chatsworth Park Elementary School, and I got tested into a magnet program that put me into San Jose Elementary School. I went to Portola, North Hollywood High School. So my journey was a little bit different, but in the same ways that we go through the system without knowing the details from one grade level to the next. And I had that sense that I was going to go to college before I even started preschool, right? So because of our family values, our focus on education, we always knew that while we're learning things and understanding our place in the world and why, what we're good at, I call it the quadruple bottom line. What we're good at, what we like to do, what can lead to a career path, and what is good for society, right? Running for public education and going through it, I was always thinking about those things, and I think that's the way to prioritize. So my time in the system as a student was in a magnet program where I had academic excellence and great teachers and peers who were competing to go to the best colleges in America. I ended up going to UCLA where I studied ecology, behavior, and evolution. I got into the environment, and bigger questions came up as I was studying and learning about the world of why we're destroying the planet for short-term profit, right? From the environmental perspective, and I had just seen Inconvenient Truth. It was a documentary at that time that really opened people's eyes to what could happen with the way that we are destroying the planet, rainforest, polluting the oceans, all sorts of things that are going on globally. But why are we doing it? And at that level, it came down to short-term profits for corporations who would rather continue making huge profits at the expense of the environment. Oil companies are big ones that come to mind. And even right now, when we talk about global geopolitics and the importance of oil and how it is the lifeblood of the economy, um, we look at how the macro, what's going on at the global level, plays at the local level, like at a school board. What is taught? How do our kids think about themselves? How do they connect the English, the math, the science, the history to something that's meaningful and relevant to themselves? So I came out of it with a lot of different ideas, but still in that pathway. But through the environment, and then after college, I became a teacher. I taught in South Korea for a year, China for 6 months, gave me a global perspective. I came back to the States and got a master's degree, and I ran for office for Los Angeles City Controller, again, from that civic mindset and seeing so many resources are taxed. Everyone talks about taxes, and I'm in California and Los Angeles. There are a lot of tax dollars, and how they're spent is a very important question. And the first time I ran for school board was in 2015. So I've been in it for a while as a student and then an outsider, and then I ran for school board myself in 2015. And in that race, I got third place out of six candidates. It was a multi-million dollar race, lots of similar dynamics in terms of $1 billion iPad fiasco, right? The technology won't replace teachers, right? Even though we're meeting on Zoom and it's cool to connect to people around the world, but we look at the technology and how kids learn and the experiential learning that we need. We've been talking about that in that 2015 campaign, following the money, accountability, making sure resources go to teachers and counselors and nurses and librarians. We talk about our kids not being able to read, and then we're not fully funding librarians. And so since 2015, when I ran for school board, I didn't win, but the guy who won hired me. So then I worked for a school board member and saw how this big LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District, almost 500,000 students, $18 billion budget. It's a really big seat. And I'm one of two candidates in a race for one of these two seats. So my whole journey put me where I am, just my experience as a student, volunteering for campaigns, being interested in a particular issue. In my case, it was the environment that made me want to, and then just continuing to engage and be active where I can.
That's quite a journey, Mr. Patel. So, as you mentioned that you have experienced the system as both a student and an educator as well, what gaps do you personally observe or believe that they are most urgent to fix? And do you think that policymakers today are quite disconnected from the ground realities?
Good question, interesting. And for this question, I would draw from my experience as a substitute teacher, right? The ground realities are very different in the classroom. And so after I worked for school board member Schmerlson, I ran for office again. And even though I didn't win, I decided in my next path, I would go where the work is. And being a substitute teacher in LAUSD in middle school, and I'm not sure what kind of system you grew up in, but when a teacher is absent, you have somebody else who steps in and can carry forward the curriculum, the instruction, the classroom. Um, so I did that for 5 years across dozens and dozens of schools, mostly at a middle school, because that's where the need is the greatest. And it was a very good experience stepping into different classrooms, subject by subject, seeing what the kids are learning, where they're at, how they're being taught, what they're learning skills are. And sometimes you step in for a great teacher. They're sick and they're actually checking in with you by cell phone. Did you get the plan? Are the kids doing the work? I can see this through their own system. And then I have other teachers who have sub four who have checked out, right? They're glad to be out. There's no plan. The kids don't know what they're doing. They're just glad that the regular teacher's not there and now they have a sub and they can take advantage of the day. Um, so the ground realities are challenging, right? When you're the teacher with the students in a classroom, as opposed to board members who show up to a school site and get the tour and everyone's having a nice day and there's special attention given. And I've been on that side of it as well. And so, yeah, it's hard not to be, disconnected. Even as a candidate, sometimes different people will approach you differently and want to have different conversations with you because you're a candidate. You can't avoid that. But what you have to, hone in on is your values, right? And for me, that's one of the reasons why, I like connecting with the Indian community, right? Be the first Indian person elected to the Los Angeles School Board in over 100 years, 122 years. No Asian person is elected in the last 30 years to this school board. And so it's a part of training the next generation, getting them aware, encouraging them, offering internships, volunteers, opportunities to learn how a campaign works and share the message, work on the message, what is resonating and what needs to be discussed, right? Empowering students to be involved, parents and teachers and the people who are actually in the school system instead of, other people who are looking at it as a for-profit opportunity. Right? There's, again, so much money. People have business and trying to get contracts, consultants, and vendors. That's a whole separate part that needs more accountability.
Interesting view. So, if elected, what would be your top three priorities in the first 100 days? Like, how will you measure whether those priorities are actually being achieved or not?
So my top three priorities is really to elevate the quality of instruction, right? Right now, again, we're graduating kids who have a diploma, yes, but they don't have real world literacy or numeracy, don't have a pathway. And even before that, so many kids drop out um, throughout our public school system. It's so large, but the graduation rates are also not where they need to be in the 80%. And depending on how you measure it and who's in and out and transitions, it's not great. So in terms of raising the academic excellence as a priority and how do you connect that to a measurable objective, right? It's attendance, it's graduation rates, it's there's 125 schools in the district, and each school already has all of its metrics. And so working on all of those things, but the bottom line metric is also enrollment. How can we bring students back to the district, right? And again, talking about our public schools versus the alternatives is a big part of it, creating opportunities at our Los Angeles public schools. And so that's a primary priority. The second one is always and has been and continues to be to engage the teachers and the parents in the actual and the students in the actual governance of their schools, of local control, right? So often, what happens in a big school district like Los Angeles is you have top-down decrees, ordinances, resolutions that require the people in the classroom to do things that they don't necessarily understand, weren't trained on, don't agree with. But those people in the downtown office building are getting paid large sums of money to tell the teachers in the classroom how to teach, right? As opposed to that um, framework, we need to refocus the resources on school site staff who actually spend time with students, like teachers and full-time nurses, librarians. I mentioned counselors, right? That's a big one. When you have, and there's different kinds of counselors, attendance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, right? We talk about mental health. There's lots of things that we could be doing to be proactive instead of reactive to bullying and other downward um, behavior spirals that happen in schools when there's poverty and discipline and instability. And so academic excellence also means stopping social promotion. So one of these big things that doesn't happen, and this is kind of a, I haven't talked about it too much, but it's a tricky metric and it's not something that I want to really publicize, but like an interesting metric would be how many kids do you hold back for not being at grade level, right? What's going on is kids get pushed forward, not being able to read and do math from elementary school to middle school. And as a middle school teacher, I saw that. So the key area would be to hold kids back who aren't reading at grade level and who don't have math skills at grade level or at least one grade level. So many kids are just, again, two, three grade levels. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just pushed through. And then that goes into middle school and where they're supposed to develop those life skills and their focus, that quadruple bottom line is, like I mentioned earlier, what they like to do, what they're good at, what's a career pathway, and what's good for society, where that can start to develop. Instead, it becomes Lord of the Flies. I don't know if you've, or Animal Farm, some classic American books, and the kids don't understand why they're there, what the education system's for. They don't see a pathway for them, and it doesn't connect to them. So that academic excellence also ties into that relevance and meaning. One of those ways that I do that is with field trips. So a measurable thing is I want to have more field trips, make it easier for kids, teachers to plan field trips. It's very difficult, can cost a lot of money. There's a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, but there's a lot of things we can do on field trips that I would really want to improve. And that's a metric, more field trips from more schools. There's already some good progress on that. Just talking about it and people realizing, hey, there's funds here that could be used, introducing that to more schools, but then also connecting it to the community. And that ties into um, kind of my third point is um, it's again connecting to the community, right? It's elevating the voices that matter, utilizing the structures of the government that already work. The school board is a powerful position to then do things at scale. 80,000 employees, again, $18 billion budget. So there's a lot of different aspects that it can be applied. Environment is one, right? The scale that LAUSD employs. Um, was working with the Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters, different environmental groups that are working on this specifically. And, just like that, connecting to different groups and families and communities who care and incorporating them in the, the input of what's actually happening.
And those are some much needed reforms, I believe. So, have you anticipated any challenges you will or you might face in implementing them?
Yeah, yeah. A big district with a lot of employees, there's a lot of inertia. So it definitely would take a lot of planning, organizing meetings, learning who's actually responsible for doing what work. And that's one of those things where if you simplify the organizational structure, right, more people at school sites and less people in downtown as management, right? Especially when they're outside consultants and vendors and people who have contracts with the district for products. It becomes very, it becomes the resources are not spent close to the kids in service of an institution as opposed to in service of the critical thinking development of the kids.
Right, right. So since we are talking about already systems and the structure, my next question, of course, it's about. So you see, public education systems are often struggling today to reconcile policy intent with the implementation. So where do you think LAUSD stands today? Is it more of a funding issue or a governance issue? What structural reforms would you suggest for improvement?
Well, there's one specific one in terms of, again, Los Angeles Unified School District is very large, 1,000 schools, different campuses, school sites, and it's broken into regions. And I think giving the regions more autonomy, having more local regions is a big part of it. And in this last organizational structure, the my opponent and the superintendent, every time there's new leadership at the district, they tend to reorganize structure, and it causes a big challenge. And unfortunately, we need to, I think, do it again because this last structure created very narrow hierarchies, limited control, especially where I live in the San Fernando Valley. This part of the district became one local district for 2 million people. It's 1.8 million people. And it becomes a structural reform that needs to happen, but then also empowering individual school sites, right? The principals, along with the teachers and the parents and the students, if they can all come to agreements on this is what we want at our school, and you can support that with cutting the bureaucracy, I think that's the direction to go.
Uh, there is one criticism about the large public systems in education and especially policy making is as which I have often seen in India as well, that there is a lack of accountability at multiple levels. So how would
Yeah.
you build a culture of accountability in LAUSD, and like how do you ensure that those accountability without over bureaucratizing the system?
Yeah. And this is so simple. It's transparency. Know who's getting paid how much for how much work. And if it's a public institution, that information should be easily accessible. And LAUSD had an initiative like that, but it became problematic for everyone to know that. And so what ended up happening is they undid it. They rolled back a transparency tool that actually existed. So I think that's a good place to start, right? For every dollar to be clearly shared in terms of who's getting it and where it's going, right? And recently there was a big conflict with the teachers union and the district and different labor unions partners who represent workers in their separate bargaining units for pay and benefits. And each bargaining unit, each union is negotiating differently for the work that they do at a school site. So that's a whole layer that when we get into it, we see that you have to work with so many different partners to make it work. And that's the energy that I'm coming with. Just trying to push that forward, have the conversation, present good ideas. Again, focus on getting resources to the school site instead of um, supporting my big donors and vendors and other people who have other interests with the school district.
So So, student mental health is becoming a major concern globally, as we all know, right? So, how do you plan to address this within the schools? Like, do you support increasing counselor hiring or introducing new models like peer support systems? And how will you ensure that these policies reach every school and not just a few?
Yeah, that's good. Student mental health is so crucial. And you named some of the best solutions, more counseling, peer counseling, right? Just paying attention. I go back to again hiring the staff closest to the school site, and a lot of them are counselors. You also have to look at the broader atmosphere. What are people absorbing? What's the news? What are people talking about? What's on the screens, right? All the other impacts on student mental health are challenging and complicated, and the best policy is to hire more people who can give the kids attention that they need when they're in need of it, and be proactive, right? If you have instead of huge caseloads where you're the counselor for 300, 400, 500 students, if you bring that down, then the adult can actually support more kids and understand better as opposed to just dealing with the discipline issues and being stretched thin, which unfortunately so many counselors, so psych social workers, people who can exactly deal with it are. Yeah, there's all sorts of different challenges with public school, right? If you're coming from poverty and what's your home life like and how does the school district, the public school, what resources are actually given to benefit? There's a lot of room for improvement there. There's a lot of resources. People want to invest resources there, taxpayer dollars. But then again, we see so many instances at all levels, right? Like you're talking about India or Los Angeles, um, different municipal benefactors and contractors benefiting throughout election cycles and even generations.
So there is an increasing debate as well around the curriculum relevance, and even you said that there should be a balance between academics with the real world skills which are
Talk about
required for
India,
careers.
Indian politics, and Indian
So,
education, if you can.
should a school integrate more skill based or vocational learning, or how can schools better prepare students for the future careers? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, curriculum and its relevance, right? Right now, there's been, and one of my other previous meetings got into it about ethnic studies, right? How is ethnic studies incorporated as curriculum? One of the first classes I took as an advanced placement class in high school was AP European history. And so the colonizers' history, something that we learn in many places around the world, is the right history, right? The winners who write the history. And that's what we've been learning so long. And so understanding the real history, different perspectives, incorporating it, is a big part of it. And I think you had like three or four good points in there, and each one requires deep study. We have, again, this ethnic studies committees, different opportunities to utilize um, the structures that already exist to have more robust conversations. Because when we talk about, what was the second half of your question? Can you repeat it?
What are your opinion, like how can schools better prepare students for this future careers while including academics, balancing the academics and the skills?
Yeah, so that part of getting them ready for careers while balancing academics, right? Getting ready for careers means showing pathways, demonstrating what that quadruple bottom line again, what they can see, and I think experience as pathways for them to be professionals in whatever fields we decide, right? We can set that direction as a public school district, and the medical science magnets and so many other ideas have been put forward, gifted programs, dual language immersion, special language, the career, technical, and vocational in so many different fields that we can introduce at different schools and programs and support the existing ones. So, yeah, right. Connecting it to, the revision that happens in the history versus the experiencing it. Like, again, going to museums, understanding your own city's history, being specific to your community, local businesses, even field trips to government, right? Seeing how the system actually works and connecting it to grade level and curriculum, right? That's the big part where if you can connect all of these things and have a scaffolding where kids understand why they're learning, where they're going with it, with that intention of developing pathways to different careers, at least exposing them, to letting them know, seeing those, experiencing many different ones throughout their K through 12 education.
Uh, Earlier, when we talk about the accountability, you said that the transparency is the key to ensure the accountability. So, what does an open book system practically look like in large districts like LAUSD? Like, do you think that it would like slow down the decision making, or maybe technology can play a role in making it more accessible?
Yeah, you're right. It can, if it's up to date, day to day, that's not even the key. Just key points in the year need to be more clearly accessible. And lots of times, budget decisions are made on the back end, and you just see it in the front end, even after the decision's made. So that incorporating the school community more in their school site budgeting is where that goes. So it can slow down the process potentially, but I think that's what we need to build trust, right? The district people need to believe that their dollars are being spent effectively, and they trust that it's going towards their kids and the staff at the school site. So I think it's worth it. Yeah, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, how would you ensure that there is a faster and more effective decision making? Like, do you believe in decentralization, or how will you balance autonomy of schools with centralized control?
Yeah, I believe in decentralization, more local community decisions, and the district has a culture of fear, managing from above with people's jobs, and the management versus teachers kind of mentality, I think is really um, undermining public institutions, right? How it is a battle between private kind of perspectives and public outlooks. So, to incorporate people is the way to do it, right? I don't think it slows it down. I don't think it becomes a barrier. I think it just allows for more opportunity for collective decision making. And in making a 2-year budget, there's lots of different ideas that are circulating in the specific policies that can happen if, more people like myself are elected. So there's other ways that we can look at long-term governance, a 2-year budget, so that there's more time to actually pay attention to each year's budget and project versus being retroactive and always um, governing from kind of a short-term perspective.
Schools are deeply connected to the communities. So, how do you plan to strengthen that parent and community engagement within the school governments? Or how will you engage communities that are traditionally less involved into the school governance, or parents who are less involved into the school governance?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing in my campaign, showing up to schools, talking to parents outside of schools, going to their PTA meetings or their parent organizations and trying to get to know people. I think that's the way to do it. It's again 125 schools in the district I'm running for, so it's a really big district. So I'm getting out there, meeting community by community, and I think that's how you do it by being accessible and then building a culture of that, hiring other people, fostering that, and recruiting and retaining talent like that, right? When you have that kind of culture, then more people want to come and be a part of that public education system, not just the students, but also the staff.
So, Mr. Patel, you have an Indian roots, right? So, how do you see representation influence, like being as someone who have Indian roots? How do you see a representation influencing leadership in global public system? Like, do the diverse background bring different governance perspectives? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, yeah, very good question. And just in my race this time specifically, I'll give you the example of Assembly Bill 715. So this is a California State Assembly bill about anti-Semitism prevention. And so there are definitely some things that are taught in some ways that are indicative of good representation, of strong representation, versus I've been a sixth grade history teacher. And in sixth grade history, it's world history. And what we learn about India from an American textbook is I call it Hindu phobic. It's racist. It undermines kind of the Hindu and the Indian perspective, and very much is a colonizer's outsider perspective that simplifies it as caste is the primary thing, cows are religious, and curry was a spice and trade, right? And then the Aryan invasion mythology, so many other things that are in there that are taught, and people believe because we are not able to properly represent what actually happened, right? Versus another community that's able to get teachers fired if they say something wrong about how they're teaching about particular historical uh, event, even if it portrays um, their community in a negative light, or it can be misinterpreted that way. So then it's a clear possibility. And then you see it in so many other ways. The lack of promotion of Indian and Asian people to higher levels of the district, the lack of hiring Asian teachers. When Asian teachers are hired, they're paid less than their equivalent. And then all these things combined means there's less Asian enrollment. So as Indians, we want to go to public schools, but if they're good enough, right? If they're not good enough, then we're going to find an alternative. I think that's a very similar dynamic everywhere, right? If you can go to the local school, Great. If you can't, then you're going to find a private alternative in your budget and make it work. And so that's the dynamic that's going on, and we need to recognize it and compete at that.
So true. A quick rapid
Okay.
fire kind of questions.
All right. Last set. Yeah.
Yes, yes, last segment, then we'll close it up. Okay. So, one word to describe the current education system.
Potential.
A leader you admire and why.
I really appreciate Ralph Nader. I don't know if you know him, but he's somebody who ran for president, has been active, advocating for things that benefit people for a long time, and put himself forward in difficult elections to represent underrepresented perspectives. And he continues to do work and impact, society. So in a positive way, especially in America. So I like, that's one. I have many, but okay.
One policy would change immediately.
Sixth grade is in middle school. If I could just like magic one thing, but I think there has to be slower. But sixth grade is in elementary school, primary as opposed to middle school.
Books or mentors that influenced you the most.
One of the books was Animal Farm and George Orwell, just understanding society a little bit at a different levels. It was amazing to 1984, right? The dystopian future. I don't know if you've read that, but seeing what government is, it could be, and projecting, that's a book that like opened my mind to possibilities. Mentor, I had a AP history teacher, even though the class was difficult and it was challenging. He gave volunteer hours for um, working on a campaign, volunteering on a campaign. So Mr. Toy is one of my high school teachers who put me on this path by giving extra credit to volunteer on a campaign and learn more. Once you get engaged and you pay attention, it brings you, I think, forward in that space.
Classroom or boardroom, where do you feel more at home?
Classroom. I do like the classroom. It's nice to be with, but also when it doesn't matter what group of kids or adults, if they want to learn, if they want to be there and you're sharing something that they're interested in, that's a great feeling.
And if you had to define your campaign in one message to voters, what would it be?
It's time for change. We know what works. I've got the track record. It's time to put in Ankur Patel in office for school board.
Lastly, before we wrap up, what advice would you like to give to young people like us who want to bring change in public systems?
Just keep it up. Keep paying attention, reach out, talk, engage, volunteer, try to climb the ladder, right? Volunteer, intern, get paid to do the work, right? That's the thing that shows that people actually care. It makes such a complicated equation where people judge based on how much money you raise, but then also in the society, we want to spend our time on things we believe in. But if we can, again, spend your time in something that you can believe in and understand the progression and development and how to go from a volunteer towards earning a career in a particular field. I think that's that career pathway that can start with you getting more involved in elections and government and research and civics.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Patel, for sharing your insight and experiences with us today. It was truly valuable to hear your perspective on education, governance, and kind of leadership you aim to bring. We wish you all the very best for your campaign, and we hope your vision continues to inspire meaningful change. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.